Good afternoon, everyone. Clearly, I was the only one to get the memo on the fancy dress tie day, but apologies for that. Two pieces of good news. The first thing is I'm going to keep this to probably less than 30 minutes. So if there are any time, there should be time for questions at the end. And also, I'm not going to do a big piece around Maxima. If you do want to come and understand what Maxima does, then our stand's out there, and my attractive colleagues, I'm sure, will be able to provide you the information required. Collaboration is one of those topics which is, it's quite a broad topic, yeah? And putting together information to get together today, I'd like to just put a little bit of a definition around what I mean by collaboration. Clearly, it's the things that we use every day, like email, and it's the things like the collaboration tools, maybe Messenger and those types of technologies. But also about sharing data as well, so sharing information to help with those collaborative processes. And I see collaboration really as a type of loose business process. It's a very important process. And I think increasingly we're seeing that some of the things that are happening with collaboration is that it's starting to come from the home into the workplace. And I'll talk a little bit about that as part of the first point around the transformational forces, which are starting to affect the adoption of collaboration tools and services. The second thing, controversial statement maybe after some of the sessions earlier on today, but collaboration natives are under 30. I'll qualify that as we go through, and there may be some exceptions I wanted to add as well. And the other piece is around then how collaboration is starting to impact the business and start to provide, business is starting to capitalize on the collaboration technologies, and then leading into 3 examples from customers that we're working with. Can I just ask a question? The technologies down the left-hand side, LinkedIn or services, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Hands up anyone who has never used them. Brave man. Okay, so it's a technology that's very broadly used, and you've done very well to avoid it so far. They're clearly technologies that tended to be used in the sort of home and outside of the office space, but now start to be brought into the office. And I consider myself as one of these what I would term expats. Some of these people are not natural to these technologies. You could probably tell by my initial introduction where under my name was my email address rather than a Twitter account or something. Yeah, it's, emails and phone is probably my natural base and my natural language. Yeah, but I'm starting to see how these things can be useful in the business, and I'm starting to bring these things into the business and seeing colleagues doing similar sort of things. It's interesting, my 60-year-old son, when he saw me using LinkedIn, he sort of watched for a couple of minutes and said, it's like Facebook for old people. I thought it was a very good description. But, I sort of come on to then the natives, which are kind of driving some of this, which, I'll give you an example, again, family member. I'll come and talk a little bit about this, but, my daughter, if there was an Olympic event for collaboration, she'd be there on the podium, yeah? And the way that I've seen the younger people, and I consider myself in the sort of 40-plus category, the younger people coming into the workforce who are just naturally used to these technologies, and I just find it, I just don't find I have the bandwidth to be able to deal with some of these things. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well, and the influence that new blood into the business is having. And then the other factor, which is really around, in the past, collaboration projects have been quite difficult to get justification for. The softer benefits, lower intangible benefits, quite difficult to be able to justify them. I'll talk a little bit about this as well. Clearly, delivering those as a cloud service makes things a lot easier to be able to say, well, look, let's give it a 6-month try. Let's make a go of this on a small scale and see if we can see some benefits before we fully deploy. And again, that makes it easier to start to use some of those technologies. I kind of feel lost if I didn't at least show some form of slide which shows some form of industry metrics. This is getting a little bit old now, but Keystone did a survey a few years back. And what they did was they looked at people who had actively used and deployed collaboration and productivity tools in their business, and then started to do some measurements in terms of earnings per employee. So some crude estimate of productivity improvement. And one thing that they came out with, which I guess was a key finding, was that compared to the ones who are not using collaboration tools very much, the lower quartile, comparing those with the upper quartile were getting, on average, 23% better earnings per employee. So you imagine, take your business and what it generates as turnover, and imagine, making that 5% more even. What difference that could make. So collaboration can make a massive difference to a business. It is measuring the result, which is, tends to be one of the difficult things. So I thought it'd be useful just to talk through a little bit about my point around why I think natives under 30. And I'll use Emma, my daughter, as an example. Now, this isn't Emma. My daughter has shoes. But it is, I think, probably a good example. I watched my daughter for about an hour and a half organise a sixth form ball a couple of years back. And it was almost an experience for which, like watching wildebeest go across the plain. It was kind of a revelation for me. So I'd never seen this sort of thing happen. So let me just talk you through what I saw, and you may have experienced this already. So Emma was arranging this ball, and so the first thing, she gets home, very excited, gets straight on MSN at the time, and starts to connect with 6 or 7 conversations going in the first 5 minutes. One of the conversations then spins off that, can you deal with the music involved in a string quartet, go and organise that. Off goes another set of conversations with a string quartet to organise that in parallel. My daughter's then up to 20 or 30 conversations with people talking about who's going to deal with the venue, checking on websites, looking at availability and costs. People come back with information around that. Who's going to deal with fancies, the cakes, etc. for the evening? Well, my wife's a bit of a dab hand, so that was actually walking down the stairs and actually going and asking someone to say, will you deal with the cakes? And then, probably an hour or so into this was then, let's start to contact people who test the price of the tickets, speak with our close friends around this. And probably at the peak time, she had 30 or so conversations going at any one time. I just saw this as a remarkable way of working. It's 20 phone conversations going on would be my analogy. And all of this was just going on, and within 90 minutes, this was more or less organised. And that is such a different way of working than I'd ever experienced before. And that sort of thing is now coming into the workforce, and people are expecting that type of environment to be in place. And you can imagine the innovation that's going to drive as well around just the speed to get things done. I'll come on and talk a little bit about some of the challenges as well, because it will bring challenges with it. I thought it'd be worth just saying a little bit as well around, before I just go into some of the impact around this, is just to say I see really the cloud piece as being another layer on top of what is the global comms that we have in place at the moment. So it's a way of being able to add a layer of data and application, which means that people can share stuff, share data, communicate with each other in a more rich way than perhaps just on the phone. And one of the areas that, I guess the first area to touch on is bringing in some of the social collaboration tools into the workplace. I don't know if you saw the news that LinkedIn today has just done their first issue of shares. They went in for the top price of about $45 per share. That values them at about $4.2 billion on I think, a profit of $15 million. Yeah, the market's quite interested in this sort of stuff, yeah? You could say there might be a bit of a bubble there. But these things, these technologies are now, they're starting to see they're going to be they're more than just a social interaction. They're kind of being used in the workplace. I guess LinkedIn more for either finding jobs or finding people to fill jobs in the first instance. But we're using this technology within our business as part of marketing, sales, internal communications. These things are starting to get used more and more. I think that one of the in some ways we've got to embrace them and say yes, these are going to be used as part of our business. We can't really deny that. Some of the challenges that it brings, though, are that people are used to using these in a social setting. Sat on the sofa with a glass of wine, chatting with friends, which is quite different from the work environment. And that brings with it some challenges that, when someone might be more casual maybe in the working environment than perhaps they should be using these sort of tools. To give a simple example, someone might quite without any malice or intent, go onto a forum and say, we've got a problem with our firewall, here's the information, can you help me solve it? What a big security breach that would be. Yeah? Everyone has got the information about how to connect to your firewall and hack into your system. There are all these sort of things where people are starting to use these technologies, forums and communication, in a business setting. And I think the main thing that's missing is some form of education and some form of standards to say, if you're going to use these tools in a business setting, these are things, there's certain standards and certain ways of working that you need to adopt to make sure that they're used properly and in a business-like manner. I've worked from home for about 15 years, and I've managed to move the oven and the washer out a few years back. But this blur again of home and work, it's before 10 or 15 years ago when I first started, it was modem connections and quite difficult to work from home. Now it's a continuous experience. I don't know whether I'm in the office or at work. It's the same thing. I go on my laptop and there I am. I'm working. And that's been made easy by a lot of the technologies, hosted desktop, being able to provision virtually your desktop wherever you are, using your own equipment if necessary. So all these technologies now are making that boundary a lot more blurred. And again, this is another reason why those sort of standards and policies are quite important to have in place around how people should work with these sort of technologies. We're seeing also the main area of collaboration in business has been around things like projects and contracts. Some obvious place around information sharing. And what this brings on to talk about is not just sharing within our organization, but sharing with customers. A good example here is we do quite a bit of work in construction. Joint ventures between very big businesses that neither of which want the other to have access to their systems. And quite nice to be able to have this space to say, well, we'll share the information that we really need to as part of this project and nothing more. And this can last for the duration of the project. After that, we can archive it. And even better, we can pay for it as part of the project cost. We can cost it as part of the project value. So these are sort of things that we're seeing, and we use this as well as part of projects to our customers where we're sharing documents and design drawings and plans, etc., with customers on projects. The mobile piece. I said I mentioned there's an exception to these natives, people using these technologies. I bought my mum and dad, who are in their late 70s, an iPad for Christmas, and they're now avid Facebook fans, which is being a great policing force on our children for using Facebook as well. What's happening now is with the advent of the iPad, which I guess is defining the tablet market, what's happening is that that device is making things so simple to use. It's one button, effectively, and it's allowing people that maybe would never use a laptop, never be able to use a laptop or a PC, to be able to use some of these technologies. And I think that's the change that's starting to democratize the way that this information is being used. We found a few gotchas around these devices and using them for collaboration. The obvious one, screen size is a bit of an issue. We found things like devices that don't have QWERTY keyboards. It can be sometimes difficult to put your password in because you can't find the right keys on the number keypad to do it properly. There's a number of issues around using this, but I guess the main advantage being if it gets lost, you don't lose any data. The data is held centrally. Last piece I just want to cover on the impacts is, I mentioned at the outset around this difficulty of getting collaboration projects up and running and the risks associated with those things. What typically happens, if you've ever been through a collaboration project, what tends to happen is you spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to get the technology in place and to kind of go through and transform the way that people work, which is an expensive business, only to find after the first few months of productivity dips and people get disillusioned before you then start to get a return probably 6 or 9 months later. So in the words of a friend of mine, you've got to kind of grab your knickers on that and just sort of ride it for 6 months and say, this is going to be all right. But a bit of a high-risk strategy. Whereas with cloud, you can then start to put these technologies and these services in place at a relatively low cost. And take a small-scale view around, let's see if this is going to work in our setting before you then make a larger commitment and scale that up without any real worry from a capital investment point of view, which I guess is an important point for the finance director. Right, I did promise, and this was, and Emma mentioned about case studies. I've got 3 examples I'd like to run past you, which are things that we've been involved in recently. And these are quite diverse examples as well. So the first one is in the financial sector. A company called Hatfield Phillips, they work in what's called commercially mortgage-backed financial securities, which means they look after loans, big complex loans for office blocks and shopping malls and those types of things. The bits that the banks find quite difficult to do. I'll talk a bit about that project. There's also a project for an international automotive retailer, which I cannot mention who they are. But very interesting story there around putting in place a global intranet, which was kind of a top-down and bottom-up sharing of information, and I'll mention that as well. And finally, kind of small-scale project, starting very small and showing how these things can very quickly gain momentum. I'm not going to go through all of that, but I'll pick out the kind of the bones from it. So Hatfield Phillips, initially their tracking was run on a spreadsheet, and I guess all our organisations use spreadsheets probably for things that they shouldn't be used for. But this was kind of used for all of the activities that are required around tracking and managing the loan. And clearly, a spreadsheet, single user, it can get corrupted. There's all sorts of issues around it. So they wanted to make that a multi-user environment, and they decided to use Dynamics CRM to do that with some customization, typically called XRM these days, using CRM as a platform for building other types of solution on top. The results around that were very much, I guess the key things that this type of technology brought were it's very quick to put in place. The platform was already there, some customizations, and off they go. And that was deployed very quickly in a space of a few months. And what it meant is that then people were sharing information along the process, and what was happening otherwise was everyone was ringing around everyone to find out whether a particular job had been done or not. A couple of interesting challenges around the usual thing around any of these projects. It's quite difficult to get people who understand the business, who need to be involved in making that change of working practice, to be involved in the process because they've got a job to do already. And as one of my favourite project managers says, you ask him, who do you want to speak to in the project? He says, find me the busiest people, and they're the ones that we need involved in the project because they know what's going on. They're connected with different parts of the business. Second example around automotive retailer. Old Intranet, they, under their retailer organisation, have a lot of brands in terms of dealership brands. And so they had a fragmentation of information held in different forms and in different websites, and wanted to bring this together. The main reason was to try to push information down to the organisation so everyone had a consistent view of what the organisation was doing. But as importantly, also to push information up. So, one example was to have an ideas forum, and one of the ideas that came up in the business was if those little paper mats they use in cars, when you're going take your car for a service, if they're clean, they could reuse them again. This was a guy's idea who was in the workshop. So reuse the clean mats, the paper mats. And they did a calculation of what that saved them as an organisation. It was hundreds of thousands just for a simple little idea like that. And it's those sort of ideas that they're looking to capture and then percolate up and across through into the business to see if they can improve the practices. They put videos online to, video training around best practices and things that they're doing in different parts of the organisation, and a way to be able to ask the top man or top person in their area of the business any particular questions. So create that connectivity in the business that wasn't there. So that's been rolled out to 14,000 users worldwide. Done in a space of, the chief exec wanted it in 3 months. It was actually available within 5 months and live in 6. So the results can be done very quickly because you don't need to obviously build the platform yourself. It's already there. One of the lessons learned from the project was really to keep the scope very tight, keep people's expectations as realistic as possible, and then deliver other functionality on top of that. And the training is really important. You think, well, it's a web browser. Everyone knows how to use a web browser. You just click on anything blue underlined and it takes you somewhere. But it's important if someone is responsible, let's say, for an area of a site, and they can create sites, and they can administer, and they change sites, can also delete sites. They need to understand that that responsibility they've got is supported by the training they need to make sure they can administer that properly. The last one I want to throw in, I did promise I'd come in on time, was a very small project we did. It was an IT director that for years had been trying to put in place a CRM system to share leads between different parts of their business, and never really been able to get the investment for it. And so they started off with a very small scale pilot around using CRM to share leads and share customer intelligence across their business. This is UK, US, France, and Netherlands. And very quickly it grew to 30 users within a space of a few months across 4 countries. And I spoke with the IT director recently, and his statement was, we've done CRM by stealth. This information, we wouldn't have been able to put this infrastructure in place before. And because we could start small, I could convince the exec team that this was something that's worth doing, and get to a point where we can start to prove the value of doing it. And whilst he thinks it's expensive, everyone would like something for a little less cost. It's something that allows him now to provide that service across his business where he couldn't do that before. That's me done. I guess everyone's tired and emotional, so I didn't want to keep it to a long slot. But I will take any questions if you have any. Hello, yes.
On the last case about the CRM, have you ever come across an experience of using CRM to do LinkedIn or Facebook with the API?
Yes. There are connectors for those types of things, LinkedIn, Twitter. We've seen customers quite interestingly using Twitter as a way of being able to, say, send out a press release around a product launch or some change in the business, and then you track the Twitter that happens around that. And you may then, part of that conversation, but track that conversation to see what's been generated from the press release. So those types of things are quite useful.
And then information gets put into the CRM?
Absolutely. So you can then start to, once that conversation gets to a point, we say that now is an inquiry. So we can bring that in as an inquiry and then track that through into an opportunity and etc. So it's it's seen as being, it's kind of early days as yet, but it's seen as being a way of being able to, another source of potential inquiries. Yes.
In your experience, is there one specific collaboration tool that drives the biggest business benefit or even the best use of the suite?
Rather than talk about any particular religions of technology, I think certainly what we've seen in our business is once you bring in the messenger type presence technology, on top of your email and across other things that you're doing as well, that opens up a new world. And I guess many people are already using those sort of technologies, but that kind of is the what I would describe as a Sky Plus experience. It's kind of a new way of watching television. And you see, I've been on calls where you've got the conference call going on, and behind the scenes you've got the real conversation going on Link or whatever you use as your messenger facility. Yeah, I think scale is a key thing. So it's about saying I can start small if I need to, and I can cost it that way. So I don't need to invest in a big capital expense at the start. So that is very important. I think the other aspect of it is, from my satellite picture, is the fact that it is outside of your organisation, and so it means that in some ways it can be easier to connect with other people outside your organisation. They're just another user effectively on that system. Yes.
Have you any comments on whether video conferencing is an important aspect, whether it helps, whether it's easy?
I'd be interested in throwing that out to the audience. I'll tell you, my experience of it. I mean, we use it, and To be honest with you, in our organisation, bandwidth is the issue. I don't know if that's true of lots of organisations, but bandwidth could be an issue if you don't want to do that properly. We've used a range of technologies to try to do this, but I think you've kind of got to take the networking piece in hand with that to make sure it works properly. And clearly, you know, that's okay if you're working internally, but if you're working with third parties, they're going to have the same issue as well. I mean, I don't know if anyone would like to comment on that, may have more experience than I on that. No? Okay. It's okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. I'll take my comedy tie off now and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.